Thank you. By the ripe old age of 6, I had become famous in my family for uttering 2 declarations of truth. The first declaration came sitting in the back seat of my father's car on the way home from kindergarten. Unprompted, I inquired, "Dad, did you know that words mean things?" Amused, my father responded with a question of his own. "Oh yeah? What do they mean?" I answered exactly what they were meant to mean. Very philosophical. The second declaration came about 7 months later, this time in the backseat of my mother's car, this time on the way to kindergarten. By this time, I was a seasoned veteran of kindergarten, very ready to matriculate to the promised land of first grade. As I remember it, I was sitting, gazing forlornly out the window, afflicted by a brand of ennui experienced only by disillusioned kindergartners. "Mom," I paused to be sure I had her undevoted attention. "People are stupid." This declaration was met with very stern chastisement. I remember of a mixture of "that's not nice" and "don't say that" and "how would you feel if somebody called you stupid?" I took my licks in stride and stayed silent. However, later that evening, my mother asked me why I thought people were stupid. I replied that people always seemed to be doing the opposite of what they were saying, and that must mean that they didn't understand the words they were saying. A moment marked by equal judgment and recognition became a learning opportunity. My mother reminded me that words indeed do mean things, and that my assessment of stupidity didn't quite match the definition of stupidity. So she introduced me to my first thesaurus. We started with the word inconsistent. Then we meandered to contradictory. Before long, I was really hitting the hard stuff. Words like capricious or paradoxical, mercurial, unscrupulous. Each word conveyed a similar overarching theme, but each one had a unique flavor or undertone, making it the perfect word in the perfect context. These declarations and the fact that my family was willing to actually entertain them set off a lifelong vexing love affair with words. While I owe so many of my greatest achievements to this love affair, I also blame my codependent relationship with words for some of the worst, most humiliating, and most anxiety-inducing experiences of my life. In college, I almost failed the written portion of my comprehensive exams. I was in a room with roughly a dozen other English majors, and our only instructions were to not use any outside references and not speak to one another. Halfway through, spurred on by panic-induced reckless abandon, I piped up, "Does anyone know that word? It starts with a P. It's kind of like predisposition. It's almost like propensity, but it's not that. It starts with a P. You guys know. What's that word?" And my professor immediately escorted me out of the room and reprimanded me for breaking flagrantly and simultaneously the only 2 rules she had given. Fast forward to grad school. After a series of medical emergencies caused me to rack up a number of incompletes, I was forced to leave school and get a job. However, I continued working to finish these incompletes, and while I was able to finish most of them fairly rapidly, it took me almost 10 years to turn in the last 2 requirements to get my degree. And it wasn't because I couldn't write the papers, it's because I couldn't stop writing them. At one point, I had 4 different versions of a 20-page paper. All of them were deficient in my mind, even if by just a single word. A trusted confidant who had been a witness to this struggle eventually approached me with some advice. She told me, "Anything worth doing is worth doing badly." I'm pretty sure that blew every gasket in my brain. Anything worth doing surely was worth doing perfectly, or at the very least to the best of my ability. What she was trying to get me to understand, though, is that I was missing out on the doing because I was so caught up in the practicing. I was letting one imperfect word obscure the message that 5,000 other finely crafted and tuned words were trying to achieve. And this struggle isn't limited to the written word. Anyone who has a prolonged conversation with me surely has become aggravated by my sudden gazes off into the distance. I'm sure they're thinking that I am either finished or maybe having a stroke, but really what's happening is I'm diving into the deep end of my inner thesaurus, swimming through an ocean of words looking for just the right word. Unfortunately, in the meantime, the conversation has come to a screeching halt and I've lost any rhetorical momentum I may have achieved. Now that my entire career depends on the productivity of one-on-one conversations, I need to have a coming to terms with my inner thesaurus. I need to remember, nay, to internalize, that the search for the perfect word shouldn't eclipse the delivery of the message. Thank you.
Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, most welcome guests, and especially Allison. Congratulations on your icebreaker speech. I had not heard Tatiana's speech, but I did print out the evaluation form, so kudos to me. Oh, I have to evaluate Allison, okay. The purpose of the icebreaker speech is to introduce a new member to the club and to learn the basic structure of a speech. And Allison, we learned a lot about you through what you said. I thought your opening story was just fantastic. In fact, the very strongest part of your speech was, in fact, the writing. And I would have assumed that based upon what you described, but you demonstrated that throughout. One thing that you did particularly well, which I consider to be an advanced aspect of speaking, was that in your beginning stories you used a lot of dialogue. That's something that I still struggle to learn. Instead of narrating, you had wonderful dialogue, and we could just picture you in the car and this wonderful kindergartner with her. Wonderful. And your use of humor was another particularly strong aspect. You know, a seasoned veteran of kindergarten, a codependent relationship with words, couldn't stop writing papers. Anything worth doing is worth doing badly. I love that. And diving into the deep end of my thesaurus, you know, and there were just so many more. I got writer's cramp trying to get it all down. But your strength is obviously of the writing, and I think that that showed in terms of the way that the speech came across. Now, in terms of something that you can improve on, I think to understand the difference between the writing and delivering the speech. So the first improvement has to do with connection with the audience. Because you were reading these wonderful words, there was more attention devoted here and less out here. So what I would challenge you and encourage you to do is to write it out as you had done, but then when you deliver it, just have a bullet point for each of the main topics. And that way you can spend all of your effort out here and then just briefly say, okay, what do I talk about next, and speak on that. And my second has to do with the structure. You know, I think I would encourage you to just adopt the basic standard boilerplate structure. You can always break it later, but have a clear opening. You had a nice opening, but then a body where you're going to tell us what you're going to tell us and then tell us what you told us type of thing. Again, that's boilerplate. That's not necessarily the best for all speeches, but it's a good one to learn the basics of speaking with. Again, I so look forward to hearing many more of your words, your humor, and your wonderful presence here. So thank you so much.